Hey guys, so I'm pretty excited to announce I'm finally going to start working on this woodworking table, which is going to double up as a table for this compound sliding miter saw over here. So I have all my material, as you guys already probably know, and today I'm pretty much going to determine the final set on the design, and I'm going to start working on the frame. The actual dimensions of it are going to be 8 feet long by 3 feet, and it's going to be framed out on the exterior edges with 2x6 lumber, and then my cross braces are probably going to be 2x4 just because they're a little bit cheaper and I think they'll do just fine for their intended purpose. Now, the thing that I've been struggling with about how to do this table is I'm in a 2-car garage here, so of course I'm limited on space. So it'd be nice to have a specific table, a designated table just for that saw, and then another table where I could just do some nice woodworking projects. So obviously I can't do that spatially wise. Spatially wise? I'm not sure if that's a word. If not, then correct me. But the issue with a saw like this is the decking up on the saw is about 3 3/4 inches high. And generally when you run a saw like this, or when you build a table for it, you generally have an alcove or like a cutout for the saw to sit, and it normally sinks down however high that decking is. So on this saw I would need to countersink it into the table 3 3/4 inches. Now the issue with that is because this table is only going to be 8 feet long, that's not going to leave me a ton of room to work on other projects if there's a larger woodworking project that I want to work on. So that is an issue. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to build a flat table, and it's going to match the height of this this steel welding table, so if there's ever any overflow I can just rest it flush on here as well. So yeah, it's going to be a flat table, and then some of you were wondering, well, how are you going to cut longer pieces of lumber? Because the idea behind a compound miter table is you have this flat surface that matches the height of that decking, so when you're running long pieces of lumber, it helps support that lumber, and you can have a nice proper cut per se. So what I'm kind of envisioning in my mind is, of course, I'm going to have the flat table where the saw is going to rest on. And then what I think I'm going to do is on either side of the saw, I think I'm going to just frame out little boxes. I'm kind of thinking maybe something that will hook onto the table. And then, of course, I'm going to have a back guard, so that way that it matches the back guard of that saw. And it's going to match the height of that decking, so that way when I do need to use that table for other projects, I'm not limited on the space that is not there, if that kind of makes sense. It makes sense in my mind. Hopefully it makes sense in your mind. I'll try and explain it further here in a minute. Alright, so I'm going to explain this to you one more time. So here, if you envision this as your miter saw, and this is your traditional miter saw table, as you can see how the saw has to be countersunk into the table, and then that kind of that kind of limits you on what part of the table you can use. So you can only use this part and you can only use this part. So as opposed to doing that where I limit myself on these two small sections that I can really utilize, I'm going to make, as I said, simply a flat table. So again, if you envision this as the miter saw, I'm going to have a flat table, and I'm going to, if I didn't mention it already, this is obviously a front view of the table. So yeah, you have your flat table here, this is your miter saw, and then I'm going to make removable boxes. So this is kind of where it hooks on the table, and these boxes are going to match the height of this deck. So that way, when I need to cut long pieces of wood, I can just throw them on there real quick and get nice accurate cuts. But however, when I want to use this table just for woodworking, all I need to do is just remove these boxes, which will be fairly simple. If I want to do some type of quick screw or latch for these boxes, I can do that as well. And the nice thing about this this design too is I can simply just pick up this saw and I can move it over if I need to use, the full working area of the bench. And now some of you that really don't understand woodworking are going to ask, well, you have this big, beautiful metal working table. Why not just work on that? Well, if you're doing woodworking, especially fine working or nicer woodworking, granted, I'm not that good yet, of course, but I do plan to work on my skills here. You need to be working on a wood surface. You can't really work on a metal surface because I do welding on here for one, so there's going to be little splatter beads all over here, so that's going to damage and scratch the wood. Additionally, when I'm using wood saws and stuff along those lines, say I'm cutting a piece of plywood off here and I accidentally nick this table, that's definitely going to fuck up my blade, and hopefully it won't ruin my saw. So those are just a couple of quick little reasons. And additionally, you know, this table always has dirt and grease on it, so the nice thing about a wood table is I can keep it only for woodworking and it'll be pretty sanitary. And yeah, so I'm sure there's a bunch more reasons. Those are just some of the simple, quick ones that come to my head right now. And over here, I just have a quick top lay design of how this is going to be. Just some of the initial framing for the table. Of course, I mentioned it once before, it's going to be 8 feet by 3 feet, which is going to fit nice over in that section over there. And then, of course, 2 by 6 outer framing, and then 2 by 4 studs, which are going to kind of help create a firmer work surface. The reason I'm planning to do it that way is just because those of you that go to those home improvement stores like Home Depot and Lowe's, you know, they always have that section of kind of the cheapy 2x4. So I'm trying to do this as cheap as possible and also get a nice quality product. So yeah. All right, so enough babbling on. I think the first thing I'm going to do here is start cutting the lumber that I need to make the frame, and then I'll assemble the frame, and then we'll go from there. Alright, this is going to be the first official cut of the project and the first official cut of this saw. Wow. That is a nice saw. Really annoys me how expensive screws are. I bought this box, it's a 5-pound box of 3.5-inch indoor outdoor screws, and I paid like 16 bucks for it. Anybody know a cheaper place to get screws? Alright, so as you can see, I have all my framing material laid out. I was just going over in my head to make sure that this would work. One more time, I do have the plywood, and that comes in 8-foot by 4-foot sheets. And I just wanted to double check in my head that I was laying this out right, because right now these long beams, I have them at 8 feet exactly. And if I was to accidentally take these 3-foot sections and mount them on the ends of these 8-foot sections, that would add like 1 inch and 3/4 of an inch to each end. So then I would be over 8 feet and I'd have some overhang. So this is set up properly right now. So when I do eventually get around to laying down the plywood sheets on top, I'll be good to go in that aspect. And yeah, all I need to do now is just make sure that these corners are squared up. I am doing this on my steel workbench table. It won't matter if these get scratched up a little bit, you know, no big deal. this is a work table. This is not like a fine woodworking project, so it's fine. Also, I know that this table is perfectly level, and I don't have to worry about any dips if I were to lay this down on my concrete floor here, which has a couple high and low spots, so it's just good to know I have a nice flat level working surface here. And I did say I would be screwing this. I'm going to be screwing this together with my very expensive 3.5-inch screws. I'm probably going to do 3 screws at each joint, and then probably 2 in the 2x4 cross sections that are going to go in here. Some people say that you got to bolt it together, but I'm not a huge fan of bolting wood. My experience when I try to bolt wood, it always seems to have a tendency to crack really easy. So with these screws that I'm going to be putting in here, I will pre-drill them as well. So yeah, let me get my framing square. I'll check that these are all square, and we'll start throwing some screws in here.